Good evening, everyone. Hi, this is Real Talk with GDUB. Thank you for tuning into our channel this evening. We're going to have a very interesting, diverse, controversial subject, as we usually do and have on Real Talk with GDUB. One thing I know that when you are giving truth, you have to use wisdom. You have to give it in doses, because if you don't give it in doses, it's going to be rejected. So we're just going to give a little dose tonight on some truth about sagging. Sagging is the word niggas spelled backwards. Swagging is not sagging. Sagging is the word niggas spelt backwards. I know many believe that sagging came from the prison system, but that's not where it originated from. It originated from slavery, when the slave masters then would not give them belts. They would give them, as they do in the prison system today, they would give them clothes to wear, and many times the clothes didn't fit them, or they were too tight or too loose. And they wanted it that way because they were raping the men. They would take those big Mandingo-looking warrior men, and they would take them and they would whip them and beat them down until they couldn't breathe, until they had hardly any life left in their bodies. And then they would rape them. Okay, and so they wanted their pants to sag because they would rape them on a regular basis. Our ancestors, our men, back then got raped on a regular basis for wearing their pants and didn't have belts to wear. Okay, and they would do it in front of a group of other black slaves so that they would not want, so that the women would not want the men. The women would want the white men because they were more, they felt that the white men were more prestigious than our men. And that's where a lot of that started from, as well as the women and the men. But that's another subject. We're just going to stick to swagging this evening. So we're going to talk about swagging, not sagging. Okay, many of our millennials today, I see it in the streets all day long, they're sagging and they don't know where it originated from. So that's why I brought that point out, that it came from slavery. It did not, it might have been converted over to the prison system, but it didn't come from the prison system. It came from slavery. And I shake my head because our ancestors, they and our descendants would be so alarmed if they knew that our men today were sagging their pants the way that they are, after they were killed and after they died, and they were raped and they were murdered, okay, and they were castrated, okay, because of it. And then to see our young men today that don't know their history and don't understand that, you know, it came from the slave masters, the fact that the men then, the slaves, didn't have belts to wear. And so their pants would sag, and it was convenient for them to rape them. You know, it was convenient for them to use the whip on them and to whip them and to beat them, you know. And I have to be visual with them so that I can bring the point across to make them understand that sagging is not a style. It is not trendy. You don't see a lot of white men sagging their pants because they know where it came from. They know that sagging is niggas spelled backwards. You know, they know the history of it. So you don't see a lot of white male men sagging their pants the way our black male men sag their pants and show their parts, show their private parts. It's just not a decent thing to do anyway. But because of slavery, because your ancestors and your descendants were beaten, and because they didn't have belts, because that wasn't their clothes, they were kings. They were kings. They didn't wear belts. They were kings. They didn't know anything about wearing a belt on your pants. But a lot of them took sackcloth and took the sackcloth from sacks of potatoes and onions and different vegetables that they were getting, that they had to put in bags when they picked them. They would take it and make a string, because there were no shoestrings. They would take it and make a string and try to tie it through their pants, or try to hold their pants up with those strings from the sackcloth so that they wouldn't be raped. And that's where sagging originated from. Of course, we know in the prison system what sagging really is, and we don't need to go into those details because we know what that means. Anyone that's an adult knows what that is and what that means when you sag your pants. So even with saying that, if that's what you believe, that it started from prison and that it meant that, you know, you were a homosexual and that you were valid, then why would you want to do it now in the street? Because most men that sag their pants, a lot of them I see, are not homosexuals. So why would you want to do that? Why would you want to sag your pants? Because that's giving a message. And it's a message that you don't want and you don't need if you're not a homosexual and you're not about it. So sagging did not originate from the prison system. It originated from slavery. It originated from your forefathers and my forefathers who were beaten and whipped by the slave masters. Okay? And their pants were sagging because they had no belts and they had no way to hold their pants up other than to find a string from somewhere. And that's how they held their pants up. And they were castrated because they didn't want the big men, the main dingo men. They didn't want those men to have the black women. They wanted the black women for themselves, and they still do today. They wanted the black women for themselves. So they would break down the mighty warrior men. They would break down the kings. They would break them down so that the women would no longer want them and would look at them as though they were weak. And this is still going on to date. To date, still in prison, they give you the clothes that they want you to wear. As they did back in slavery, they gave them the clothes that they wanted them to wear. They were royalty, they were kings. They didn't wear pants. They didn't wear those type of pants. They didn't have those type of garments that they wore. So we need to understand where sagging comes from. And we need to understand that the reason why a lot of white males don't do it is because they understand, they know where it comes from. You know, the Caucasians, they understand this. They know, they teach their children, you know, that it's not appropriate for them to sag their pants. Because they understand that black people, when they're slaves, at the slaves in that time, they had to sag their pants. But you today don't have to sag your pants. You do have belts. And you don't have to sag your pants. It's all right to wear your pants a little loose across the waist, but some of the young men, some of the millennials, I see ridiculous. And you guys are the future, and you need to understand your history. You know your history. All of these things that you are doing now, following suit, thinking that it's a fashion or thinking that it's trendy, is not a fashion. It's not a style. It's not trendy. And our forefathers and your ancestors, your descendants, would be upset if they knew that our black men today were sagging their pants after they died and were killed and murdered for this very thing. So we need to understand the origin of it. We need to understand before we do things and just follow trends and not understand what the trends are and just believe what we hear. So do your own research and do your own history on this. They also have breeding farms where they would take the black young men and put them in the barns and put a sackcloth over their head, and they would put the women in there with them to breed, to have sex, to have intercourse with these women. And some of these women were their mothers and their sisters and their relatives. Yes, they would put the young men and put sackcloths on their head, and they would put them in the barn with the women just so they could breed and so that the women could have children, so they could raise these children up as slaves. And so they could sell them off as at auctions when the women had these babies. And some of them had sex with their own sons and didn't realize it because they had sackcloths on their head and covered them up. And the women didn't know who these men were, and they tied the sackcloths around their face and around their head. And they put them in these dark barns so they didn't know. They couldn't even see who they were made to have sex with. So they could bear children, so they could have children. Hence the term MF. And a lot of y'all use that very loosely, mother effer, and don't even know where the term comes from. Don't even know where the term originated from. The term is also a biblical term, believe it or not. So you need to do research on this, and we'll talk about that, and I'll tell you where to find that term at in the book, in the Bible, and where it actually came from, where it actually originated from. So understand that sagging is spelled nigger backwards. So the next time you decide you want to sag your pants, think about your ancestors. Think about what they went through. Think about the fact that sagging is niggers spelled backwards. And that's how they still look at you. And that's how they still think of you. And in those terms. So I just wanted to bring a little truth again this evening. Again, and to let you know that There's a lot of truth out there that has not been told. We need to wake up. We need to do some research. We need to understand and not getting upset when somebody is trying to bring truth. And I don't, you know, if you want to continue to live and embrace a lie, then you can do so. That's your choice. But it is my call here on this earth to tell the truth and to bring truth to my people, to wake them up and to make them conscious. So now that you've been told that sagging is nigga spelled backwards, and I need you to do your research and I need you to seek it out for yourself and just don't take my word for it. But understand that our people died because of it. They were killed and murdered, our men, because of it. They were disrespected because of it. So understand when you do something and you think that it's a style, it's not a style. It's not trendy to sag. Know who you are. You are a black prince. You are black kings. You're a descendant of kings. So adorn yourself accordingly. And lift your head up and be proud of who you are. Don't bring shame to our nation. Don't bring shame to our race. Because if you were to go on a job interview, 9 times out of 10, most of you know that it's not appropriate to sag your pants when you're trying to get a job, or you're trying to get in college, or you're trying to go to school. It's not appropriate. So govern yourself accordingly. And as always, I love my people. I do. I have a passion for my people, even the ones that don't want to know the truth, even the ones that get upset and get angry about it. I still have a passion. I'm very passionate about my people. And so I will always speak the truth as long as I'm able to do so. I love you all, bless you all, and have a good evening.